A 13-year-old allegedly killed by an 11-year-old white boy. A husband beaten to death by a white man who didn't like his driving. A family assaulted by whites, their house later burned down. These are some of the most violent in a decade of violent incidents against Asians in eastern Massachusetts.
Tires being slashed on their cars, eggs being thrown to their doors, their children being spit on while they're walking to school.
Elaine Song says there's no end to the violence aimed at Asians.
Where I don't really feel that it can get worse.
Song is author of a new report, To Live in Peace, a study of anti-Asian violence in Boston and how to end it. It concludes that for many Asians, acts of violence have become a part of daily life. Song says that when Asians, mostly refugees from Southeast Asia, move into white neighborhoods like this one in Revere, they become targets.
Because of Boston's history of segregated, turf-conscious neighborhoods, I think it adds an extra factor.
Saran Pong lived in East Boston until he and 3 other Cambodians were attacked and beaten one day by as many as 70 whites. He moved to Chelsea, but he didn't escape the hostility. Are violence and harassment a way of life for Asians here?
Yes. The reason that they don't want to report to police because they hate and they really don't like to make any trouble with other people. Second, they're really afraid to do that because somehow they might think people will take revenge on that.
Pong says physical attacks and harassment come from both whites and Hispanics because of jealousy as much as prejudice. He says he's afraid that younger refugees may someday take matters into their own hands. There is still no peace for Asians in neighborhoods such as this one in Chelsea, in East Boston, in Dorchester, and in Lowell. And the danger is not only that the incidents of violence against Asians will continue, but that as they become accustomed to America, Asian refugees may strike back. For the 10 o'clock news, I'm David Bowery.
Slimy, Phil, you know what I'm saying? Big boy. You find yourself caught up in a silly game. That's child's play. Don't play me out. The world depends on every little move we make. It's serious, cold serious. Now the time has come for all good to go and overthrow the bad. We're here to make a change so all can be free. A call has been made and we're back. Oh, we're back. We're back to fight the evil. We will never deceive you. Oh, we're back. Evil, we will never deceive you. Working hard to try to fight the evil play. Yeah. But it's come too late. Nothing get in our way. Yeah. Now the time has come for all good to know and overthrow the bad. To make a change so all can be free. A call has been made and we're back. Oh, we're back. We're back to fight the evil. We will never deceive you. Oh, we're back. Yeah. We're back to fight the evil. We will never deceive you. Oh, we're back. The evil, we will never deceive you. Never deceive you. Back to fight the evil, we will never deceive you.
We're back, so cutting up, cause ain't nothing up. Pardon my expression, but hunt, you ain't tough enough. In fact, you're timid, weak, soft, illiterate. Call yourself a magician, I'm not getting it. You're at the top of my list, you're most wanted. Back to take revenge for the people you haunted and wanted to be afraid of your tricks and games. But before you do that, remember I'm
Yes, I think you do have elements of racism.
The issue of race is now part of the presidential election. Democrats claim that Republican ads are racist. Republicans say that it's the Democrats who are trying to divide the country along race lines.
It's the height of hypocrisy for a candidate who ran a Democratic primary staying away from the black community so that he would not be associated too much with blacks, keeping his distance from Jesse Jackson, to then stand back and say that George Bush is racist. Frankly, I think it's like the pot calling the kettle white.
Since FDR, most black Americans have voted for Democratic presidential candidates. But this year, polls suggest that a larger number of blacks have doubts about the Democratic nominee, especially younger blacks.
The first time in my life I report the Republican.
Why so?
Because I don't think Dukakis is good enough.
Yeah, Bush is pretty good. I'd vote for him.
Why so?
For him. I don't know, he just seems like a pretty honest guy.
And in fact, Dukakis is not running as strongly as Walter Mondale or Jimmy Carter ran with black voters. According to a New York Times poll, younger blacks are more open to Republican overtures. And in Roxbury today, the Black Republican Leadership Council tried to make the most of what's still a small defection.
They do need to make a greater effort to ensure that more minorities are involved. And I think with the election of George Bush, I think you'll see more substantive involvement. You'll see that changing dramatically.
That Republicans, black or white, should support their party's nominee isn't news. But on the streets of Roxbury today, there was also a show of support for Bush. Some blacks suggested they wanted to go with the winner.
Because I don't think that Dukakis, I don't know, he ain't got it. He ain't got it.
The Republicans are also pushing economic arguments. But that doesn't seem to be selling on the streets of Roxbury.
Dukakis.
Why?
I'm here, a poor black woman. I think he would be the one that I would choose for.
But in our unscientific sample, Republicans are gaining not because young black voters are pro-Bush, it's more that they're angry at Dukakis.
I don't like Dukakis to help Jesse Jackson for vice president. That's the reason why.
Older voters were more inclined to take the long view.
Because I remember the Kennedys, how nice they were.
to the poor people.
Dukakis's problem may be that in appealing to a wide spectrum of voters, some on either end feel neglected. But even with their misgivings, black voters support the Democratic ticket more strongly than almost any other group.
These kids have grown up with open accommodations, equal rights on the books, free lunch for everybody who couldn't afford to pay for it. They don't know anything different. So in some sense, we've succeeded with them to the point that they don't recognize that we still need to fight those struggles. Mike Dukakis is right on the issues as far as I'm concerned for people who believe in justice and fair play.
For the 10 o'clock news, I'm Meg Valancourt.
It was the spring of 1985. I met a young man in his 20s.
This was the front page headline in the Washington Times today. The paper says that young man was a prostitute and a convicted felon. The man, whose professional name is Greg Davis, says the congressman paid him to have sex, hired him as an errand boy, and condoned a prostitution ring that he ran out of Frank's Washington apartment until August 1987.
He alleged that I knew about what was happening. That's just crazy.
In Newton this morning, Barney Frank denied that last and most serious charge, but he admitted he paid the prostitute for sex.
Yeah, I had personal relations with him.
And he also confirmed he hired the man as an errand boy and driver.
I thought he was an individual who not only needed help but could benefit from it and who wanted help. And I said to him, what I'd like to do is just become friends.
Frank said he paid his valet $20,000 in money and services over 2 years.
It never used the government. It never involved anything but my personal money. And his suggestion that I knew what he was doing is just a lie.
Once he suspected what was going on in his apartment, Frank says, he threw the man out.
It would happen when I was away, and he was apparently doing it somewhat discreetly at the point when it became noticeable. Then my landlord and landlady noticed it. They were upstairs. They called me, and that put an end to it.
What the congressman couldn't put to rest were questions about how a guy with a reputation for being so smart and savvy and quick thinking could have involved himself with whom he did and in the way he did.
And I saw myself, I guess, I would have to say with a little embarrassment, as Henry Higgins. I was going to take a bright human being and help him live up to his potential and make somebody a more constructive member of society.
Frank was comparing himself to Henry Higgins. That sounds like a conceit. He wanted to reform the prostitute he had solicited sex from. And Frank sees himself as the victim.
He took me. He took me financially, and even more, he took advantage of what I thought was my social mission.
The Republicans were quick to jump in today.
Barney Frank said he responded to this ad. Exceptionally good-looking, personal, muscular athlete is available. Hot bottom, plus...
Gay bashing? No way, said the Republican chairman, and then he called on Frank to quit.
Barney Frank has shown profoundly poor judgment and is not fit to serve as the congressman of the 4th Congressional District.
Frank never blinked, never wavered, never showed embarrassment today. He talked until reporters were exhausted, and he left with a confident air that voters consider public records more important than private lives. For the 10 o'clock news, I'm David Bowery. When the story broke last Friday that Frank had paid for sex with a male prostitute and then hired the man, Frank said he didn't believe the incident would affect his political future. But Frank called for the House investigation after a new allegation that all along he knew there was a prostitution ring operating out of his own apartment.
I believe his accusation, which is an inaccurate accusation, it's a lie, that I knew that he was engaging in prostitution, that I was doing all this to give him a cover so he could expand his prostitution activities, is a very serious charge. It's a lie, and I think that is the most serious one for the Ethics Committee to look at.
Frank says the most important question is whether he knew about the ring. But House Rule number 43, the Code of Official Conduct, says a member shall conduct himself at all times in a manner which shall reflect creditably on the House. That would seem to open up the question of Frank soliciting a prostitute, but Frank does not consider that appropriate.
I think whether or not in my purely private life I may have committed a misdemeanor involving prostitution, that's not an Ethics Committee issue, as I understand it.
Is prostitution wrong?
It's against the law, and as an elected official, I should not have shown any calculus for the law. And yes, I think it would be better for society if it didn't exist.
If the House investigation includes the solicitation of prostitutes, there'll be the question whether there are special circumstances involved in Frank's breach of the House rules. And since last Friday, Frank's been making the case that there are special circumstances. And those, he says, are the pressures of life as a closeted homosexual. Since then, you've said repeatedly that you were victimized, that you were conned, that you were taken advantage of. What was your error in judgment apart from being a victim?
Hiring a prostitute. I should not have done that. I will acknowledge that the emotional and physical pressures of being a gay man who was closeted led me to do things that I should not have done. I didn't have the outlets for the emotional and physical drives that I had that I needed. And that led me to engage prostitutes, and that was a terrible mistake because I should have known in my job that was a bad idea. Beyond that,
and here, more forthright and personal than last Friday's, is Frank's assessment of what he did wrong. It's a subject Frank would rather not have opened up again by the investigation he's called for. For the 10 o'clock news, I'm David Bowery.
But you asked me a question and I answer it, and then you asked me the identical question again, so I'll give you the identical answer. I am not presuming to talk to the Ethics Committee to tell them what their charge should or shouldn't be. I apologize if I haven't made that clear.
You think this is the biggest charge of all, you think, is the charge that you had knowledge?
It would be better for society if it didn't exist. That was part of my motivation, I will say, after the fact, which is to say Mr. Goby, having decided he didn't want to be a prostitute anymore, that I would, I mean, he told me that, I would help him. But yeah, I think society should try to organize itself so there was no prostitution.
On Friday, you also referred to yourself, described yourself as Henry Higgins. You're trying to help Mr. Goby reform. It seems to me that on Friday you said you were trying to help someone reform who was a prostitute. Of course, you had solicited sex from that prostitute. Is there a difference between being a prostitute and soliciting sex from a prostitute?
Yeah, there's obviously a difference. One isn't necessarily morally superior to another, but there are clearly differences, and differences are important. I never said that I felt that I was a moral exemplar who was going to lead Mr. Goby the way of the light and the truth, and my Henry Higgins reference was meant to be self-deprecating, frankly. I guess humor that you have to explain isn't very good. What I meant was that it didn't seem to me it was a very satisfactory situation for Mr. Goby. He wasn't happy being a prostitute. I thought. Turns out he was. Turns out his ambition, he now says, is to be the Mayflower, or to be there to pick up the mail, or to be there to let in a repair person, or do things like that.
Chet Atkins yesterday said...
Well, you're going way beyond what I mean, I said I would be glad to talk about the ethics thing, but I really did not, in fairness to other media, say that I would do a whole new thing on everything.
Do you mind if I ask you about...
Yeah, I do. I think you're imposing. I mean, I told you that, I'm sorry Channel 2 didn't get here yesterday to get the response on the ethics thing, but I did say that I would talk to you about the ethics thing. You're now talking again exactly about the things that I was available to the press on Friday and on Sunday, and I don't think it is useful to keep answering the same question all over, and you're asking me questions that are now identical to questions you've asked me
these questions already?
I was available to the press at a press conference for an hour and a half on Friday. I was available at 2 parades at Fall River when TV chose to be there. I did say that I would respond further with regard to the ethics thing. That was a new thing yesterday. But I don't think there's a great point to... Well, I know, I don't think...
understand that.
You're imposing,
may we talk about the Ethics Committee?
What?
May we talk about the Ethics Committee investigation? You're saying that you think there's only one issue for the Ethics Committee, and that's whether or not you had knowledge of the prostitution ring out of your home?
I don't dictate to the Ethics Committee. I am saying that set of issues that I was consciously providing a front so Mr. Goby could run prostitution out of my home seems to me the most serious charge that's been raised. But no one tells the Ethics Committee what they can and can't look into. That'll be up to them. Right.
So you're not saying that there aren't other issues that they can investigate?
I hope I don't seem rude, but you asked me a question and I answer it, and then you ask me the identical question again, so I'll give you the identical answer. I am not presuming to talk to the Ethics Committee to tell them what their charge should or shouldn't be. I apologize if I haven't made that clear.
You think this is the biggest charge of all, you think, is the charge that you had knowledge of the ring, which Mr. Goby says that you were in love with him?
Oh, that's nonsense. As a matter of fact, as Mr. Goby acknowledged in the first instance, our relationship became non-sexual fairly soon. For most of this time, the relationship was a non-sexual one, and if you go back to the Washington Times story on Friday, I believe he acknowledges that while I did have a sexual relationship with him a couple of times, I don't remember 3 or 4, by the time this arrangement was worked out, the relationship was not a physical one. I thought he was a friend. I thought he was someone who could do better than he was doing, but we were never lovers, and this was not a physical relationship during the time that I thought I was trying to help him. All right, that's enough.
Thanks, Congressman. I didn't think we strayed too far. It wasn't my understanding.
I think you did.
Thanks for your time. I appreciate it.
I will tell the station that I think that they violated the terms under which
I'm sorry that you're
I was implored to come here. We talked about it again before. I mean, you did. I said I told other media that I wouldn't do it, and I think you really.
Well, I think John responded because you were on Gene Burns this morning for quite a while.
Talking about the ethics thing.
Take $1 and go in the grocery store and you couldn't bring it all out. That's just the way it was. You rent a house, the house rent was $10, $12 a month.
When did this all change?
When Martin Luther King started marching.
James Wyatt has been driving a cab in Atlanta for 52 years. He's 84, and he's seen a lot of changes for black people.
Now, there's a school out here in Decatur, Agnes Scott College, where my mother used to cook there. And when she got off at night, she'd get a pan and fill that pan up with food, and we'd meet her and bring her home and we'd eat.
That's my testimony. Could not eat turkey at 3 o'clock on Thanksgiving Day because Mama was preparing someone else's turkey at 3 o'clock on Thanksgiving Day.
Well, I feel good about it myself, and I wish he could win. At least the vice president, at least he could win.
For months now, everyone's been asking, what does Jesse Jackson want? What will Mike Dukakis give him? But those may be the wrong questions. Perhaps Dukakis should be asking, what do black voters want?
There are some people who think the ticket of Dukakis and whoever, whatever his name is, they think it's a pretty good Democratic ticket. And then there are some people who are disappointed to say that they're going to vote Republican.
I think it's a good chance for him, to be on the ticket. And a lot of people are going to be very upset if he's not, on the ticket.
At the Auburn Rib Shack, people are still hoping Jackson will be on the ticket. If he's not,
a lot of people be downhearted, broken, especially the people that he pushed so hard to get registered voters, which he had most of the people here. It was because of him that they went out to the polls and said, well, hey, I want to register to vote.
I want Jesse Jackson to play a major role in this campaign. I want his supporters, who are out there by the millions, to be deeply involved in this campaign.
In Massachusetts, Dukakis has a good civil rights record. So does Lloyd Benson in Texas. But black voters aren't real familiar with that, and they're waiting for a sign from the man they do know.
And I think he should win, because it is everybody else had their chance. Why not get Jesse?
I think it's a time for change. A lot of folks say we're not ready. When will we be ready?
What can Michael Dukakis do at this
what
point?
Michael
He can do absolutely
is go back
nothing.
to Massachusetts
Boston.
and
The
hopefully
governor can go back
try
to
to
the
govern
State House.
Massachusetts.
Mike Dakota.
Dukakis.
They haven't heard too much about him. It's just like, for instance, a bunch of sheep. If the leader get lost, sheep scatter.
For the 10 o'clock news, I'm Christy George in Atlanta.
This was a celebration of an event that was long ago in time, and one that remains far away, at least in most of our memories, the arrival of the first Afro-Americans to Massachusetts. It happened 350 years ago today, February 26, 1638.
History doesn't come in great scopes of battles and men organized against one another, although that's what we tend to study. The most important history happens in small, quiet moments of individuals beginning to absorb themselves into a culture and a world and a family.
The beginnings of Boston's black family arrived by boat, some 700 aboard from the West Indies. Ironically, they were not slaves then, though some were perpetual servants, mostly to the state's wealthy shipping families. Others were laborers working in maritime jobs and in factories, since skilled professions were off-limits to these immigrants, which is what they were, immigrants. Their story is quite separate from that of Southern slaves, and it's a story less often heard. Their story is our story in this state where we all arrived once by boat, a story whose time has come to be told.
And you must remember the words of the Spanish philosopher José Gasset, who said so eloquently that history cannot be studied alone. It is a whole song that must be sung together. And in fact, you must know all histories of all men to sing the song.
For the 10 o'clock news, I'm Hope Kelly.
A whole generation has come and gone since that night, and there are few left who believe the whole story has been told or ever will be. Leslie Leland's account, as conveyed in Newsweek, addresses a key concern, then as now. Why wasn't the case presented to the grand jury? Leland happened to be the foreman of the panel then sitting.
Everyone was concerned about protecting the political situation of Kennedy, his political career, and no one really seemed to give two hoots about the fact that a young woman had lost her life, and that's the sad part out of this whole thing. You know, a young woman died.
As foreman of the grand jury, Leland did not have the power to open the case himself. That would have been the responsibility of Edmund Denise, then the district attorney.
We were denied access to the inquest transcript, and we were denied the right to subpoena witnesses. That denial came from the district attorney, and the denial of the inquest transcript came from the Judge Paquette. So that was the bottom line, and at that point, with those two avenues shut down, we had nowhere to go.
The Newsweek piece follows a Ladies' Home Journal article on the Kopechne family that is full of bitterness. Mrs. Kopechne is quoted as saying that the senator has never been able to satisfactorily account for his actions or bring comfort to the family. In the September issue, she says, quote, "I don't believe anything I've heard so far. I want him to tell me what happened. Can't he relieve us of this? Isn't there something he could tell us that would lift this heavy, heavy burden from my heart?" There is also in the book stands presently an exhaustive account of the entire case written by Cape Cod newsman Leo Damore. It is the forthcoming 20th anniversary of the tragedy that has inspired this new interest in Chappaquiddick, and it may be only just beginning. But it's also doubtless linked with the current obsession with the ethics of public people. Some, anxious to impose a retrospective judgment, find Senator Kennedy's role in the death of Mary Jo Kopechne a lot more suspect than the events that have lately brought down such powerful men as Jim Wright and John Tower, Joe Biden and Gary Hart. Senator Kennedy has never varied in his accounts, and today he released a terse statement echoing what he said again and again in the past. He said, quote, "I took full responsibility for the tragedy at the time, and I still do. I have expressed my remorse and responsibility to my own family, to the Kopechne family, and to the people of Massachusetts, and I express those sentiments again. I have told everything I know about the accident. But the doubts will never be resolved. 20 years later, that point has again been made abundantly clear." This is Clark Booth reporting.
We are comforted by the notion that much has changed since 1925, when the Ku Klux Klan could march with impunity down Pennsylvania Avenue right on past the White House. The civil rights revolution of the 60s, for all of its pain, did move us forward a bit, or so it seemed. But now some are asking, is racism back in flower? Is there subtly a kind of counterattack taking place on what little has been gained at so heavy a price this century? Howard Beach in the Queens section of New York, a graphic study in the potential of hatred, with 3 blacks beaten, 1 run down and killed on a highway, 3 white youths charged with the blame, leaving an entire city seething. In Tampa, the arrest of a famous athlete, the Mets' Dwight Gooden, has racist overtones, according to eyewitnesses.
He was on his stomach, and they had their knees all in his back, everything, hitting him with the black clubs and the flashlights.
Much closer to home, incidents in Stoughton and Revere, both around the holidays, are aimed at Southeast Asian immigrants. Harsh racial tensions within the Boston Corps of EMTs are revealed. The subject, ever the fertile turf of demagogues, is skillfully exploited by talk showman Phil Donahue over the issue of Mandela.
Don't be ashamed of that. I'm the mayor's policy office. I'm a policy advisor. I'm not in the least bit. Where's the mayor? Where's your boss? Where's your boss?
Is there somehow a pattern in all of this? Some think so.
Civil rights leaders point to Washington for the explanation, claiming that the mood spun by the Reagan administration in the last 6 years has sent all the wrong signals to all the wrong people.
Hardly coincidental, they say, is the fact that in the wake of a general retreat by the federal government from the enforcement of civil rights disciplines, there has been a general increase in the stirrings of the Klan and other such white supremacist hate mongers. Several such major demonstrations took place last summer. As the regional director of the Justice Department's Community Relations Service, Martin Walsh is this area's chief federal monitor of such matters. All of this data, he says, reminds us of something basic.
If we don't do what is necessary to prevent these problems from taking place, they are going to manifest themselves. And I think those institutions or those communities who have left down their guard or who have thought that the problem was a thing of the past are now facing these problems and have to cope with them after the fact.
Walsh gives the city of Boston decent grades for improving its performance in combating racial abuse.
One of the fundamental things that's taken place over the last few years has been the recognition by the leadership in this city that we have a racial problem and that they want to be held accountable for dealing with it. I think our present mayor wants to go down as one who has recognized the problem and has done something about it.
But he sees the problem sharply worsening in the suburbs, where, as the housing crunch soars, it is sure to worsen still more. And he sees it shockingly growing on our college campuses. There was the Klan incident at the Citadel in the fall, and there was the embarrassing situation early last year at Dartmouth College. And later there was a sequel at UMass Amherst, which required officials to bring in some baseball players to help cool down the situation. This, then, has been the recent pattern, and if no one can say for sure that it portends some new wave of malevolence, neither can anyone say for sure that it doesn't. For Checkpoint, this is Clark Booth reporting.
Well, for many years, my people struggled for respect and identity. Originally, we were brought over from Africa and we were classified as colored people. Then we were called Negroes. Now we're called black people. Tonight, I think I can speak for all black Americans when I say we don't want to be called black anymore. We want to be called cornbread boogaloos.
What's in a name? That's what the nation's black community is debating these days. Jesse Jackson is urging blacks to begin referring to themselves as African Americans. Historian Robert Hayden supports that idea.
A lot of people have been calling themselves African American or African Americans for years. Many of our college university programs, as at Northeastern, is the Department of African American Studies. People of African descent here in Boston in the 17 and 1800s were using the term African to talk about their social groups and their religious groups. We had the African Meeting House, so I think it's probably the most accurate and most useful term for people whose ancestors came from sub-Saharan Africa.
He can decide this. I don't have to follow.
Elma Lewis, a leader in Boston's cultural community, is opposed to adopting a new identification for blacks.
I keep hearing the discussion that people are called Italian Americans and all other kinds of Americans, and therefore it would be appropriate to say African Americans. But then you see, Italy is a country, not a continent. Africa is a continent. So perhaps we should say Nigerian Americans or Jamaican Americans or what have you. Black Americans would encompass all of us.
How many of you have heard about this debate about the identification of black versus African American? Have any of you heard about that? At the David Ellis Elementary School in Roxbury, we asked 4th and 5th grade students and their teachers what term they preferred.
Whatever they call you, African or black, it doesn't matter because you know what you are inside.
There shouldn't be any connotation after for the race.
If it's Afro-Americans, black would also be England blacks.
I call it brown.
You call it brown?
Well, it doesn't really matter because you know who you are.
It'll move some of us to think about our African roots and begin to do our family history. And I think that all black young people particularly, and middle-aged and older people, need to continue to look at their family history.
You can see that I'm an African person. We should teach that to our children strenuously. We should always acknowledge it. We should be proud of it. Whether or not we're Americans is a sometime thing. All black people in this country are not Americans. All black people in this country are black. Let's unite.
For the 10 o'clock news, I'm Marcus Jones. So you know a lot. And bear in mind, he was 28 years old when he started playing baseball. Now that's old for a baseball player. I think Wade Boggs, you probably heard about, I think, is like 26 or something like that, 27.
Like film what you just did.
I don't know. I don't think you shot any of that, did you, Greg? No, Greg didn't shoot any of my stuff for that particular report. Yes.
Did they have discrimination those days?
Did they have what?
Discrimination.
A lot of discrimination. That's why they didn't allow blacks to play. And that's why when they let Jackie play and a couple of other blacks who followed him, it was a really big deal. And you saw, there were threats out. People wanted to kill him. It was a lot like Martin Luther King when he was trying to do things to get equal rights for blacks and other minorities here. Yes?
How old he was when he died?
When Jackie died, I think he was in his 50s, actually. So he died relatively young compared to today. Yes. How did he die? He had diabetes. He had diabetes, and I think he died of a heart attack or something like that. Yes, exactly. No, they don't call him Babe Ruth. This picture here has Babe Ruth on the top and Jackie Robinson on the bottom.
Sometimes they call that person.
Huh?
Sometimes they call him that in person.
Who?
My cousin, some people, my next door neighbors.
They may be confusing Babe Ruth with Jackie Robinson. Those are two different people. Yes, over here. Yes.
How old was he when he started playing baseball? He
was 28 years old. He was almost 30 years old. So he was getting up there. And he played for 10 years after that. So he played until he was almost 40 years old. Yes, you're right there in the thing.
How long did he play?
He played for 10 years. So he played from 47, I think it was, until 57. Almost 1960. And now all the heads go up. You on the end there, yes, sir.
Why didn't he ever fight back?
Why did he fight back? Because for 3 years they asked him not to do that. He didn't want to be a bad mark on his race or on the game. See, because everyone was like, whenever he would, he used to be on first base, and people would run to first base, and they wore spikes. Then I think they may have some form of spikes in the shoes now, but they used to deliberately hit him in the knee and cut his leg sometimes when they slid into him, just to get him mad. They call him names while they were standing there at first base, say things about his family, his mother or whatever, and about his race. And he kept quiet. He never got into a fight with any of them. And over time, people respected him for that. Did you want to ask a question back there? No, okay. Well, let me stop you just for a second. Let me ask about this subject we were talking about before. How many of you have heard about the discussion about the difference? Oh, one more time. How many of you have heard about have you heard about that? You have? Okay. What do you think? What do you think?
I think that it should.
Okay, let me stop you here. Let's go over here and just get up on her. Hold on. We're going to get a little boom mic here. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
I think that it should.
This is the front line in Boston's war on drugs. 7,500 people were caught in the net last year, along with weapons, drugs, and lots of money.
We're talking about, over the past 4 years, approximately $990,000 that has been forfeited to the department.
And police have put that money to work. They've gone to court to get it and then split it half and half with the district attorney's office. The cash has gone to pay informants, buy drugs for deals, and conduct police investigations.
I think it's essential to the department because it represents the operational edge of the drug investigations. It's flexible money, it's readily available, it can be used at the discretion of the officers involved, the sergeants.
But now others are seeing a better use for that money.
We have to fight a serious war against drugs, not a phony war against drugs. To do it, we have to mobilize the troops. And the most effective troops in the fight against drugs happen to be the community residents.
Neighborhood groups want the money to go back to the community to fund drug education, drug treatment, and crime watch efforts. They met at City Hall today to back Charles Yancey's bill.
Let's be honest about it. You can't fight drugs without the resources. And it's not the drug dealers' money, it's the community money. It comes out of Charlestown, it comes out of South Boston, it comes out of Roxbury and Dorchester. It's our money. Put it back, fertilize the soil, let's fight drugs together, put up or shut up.
I think it's a mistake. I think it may be motivated by the best of intentions, but what it does is it takes from the department, as I said, that flexibility, that cutting edge. This is the fund that the officers in the street use in their day-to-day operations, and it's critical for them to have that available to them.
Police may want to keep the money, but city councilors have the votes to pass the bill, even over the virulent opposition of City Councilor Albert O'Neill, who crashed today's press conference.
Incredible. All you want to do is shake people down in this city for cash. Don't start with me, pal.
It's become a bitter fight over a relatively small amount of money, less than 0.2% of the police budget. But in this era of belt-tightening, both sides will fight tooth and nail to get anything they can. For the 10 o'clock news, I'm Deborah Wong.
Well, this is a stairway that's rotted out. The railing is gone. The staircase is starting to tip. The roof is leaking.
Commissioner William Summers gave us a tour of 157 Homestead Street today. He condemned it yesterday after being assured the tenants would be relocated while the building is repaired by the court receiver.
We have been written up literally thousands and thousands of violations on the whole Franklin complex.
Summers blames HUD for the plight of these tenants. He says the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development long neglected this building and others, let them fall into disrepair. But there seems enough blame for many to share, including the city itself.
There has to be a continuing support for this from all the parties involved, because we just can't rush in here and then walk out and leave it go or leave it partially go.
The violations are finally going to get corrected, but officials say that to maintain the repaired buildings, they'll have to fight the pushers.
If there's somebody in the building who wants to sell drugs, the people are going to smash that door down. When they can't ring a buzzer and get the person that they want, they go right through the door.
Pat Ferretta says most of the people who live in these apartments live in fear, terrorized by the pushers.
And I had 3 reports from tenants that don't like drug dealing, that crack is being dealt through a hole that's been cut in the door. They just stick the crack out after the person has stuck the money in. If I don't make sure that the management company secures it, I know drugs are going to be dealt there that night.
Mrs. Walker will be moved to a hotel or emergency shelter while her apartment is being fixed. I asked her just how bad the drug problem is.
I'm afraid to talk on that. I don't know about that.
Rather not talk about it?
Yeah.
People like Mrs. Walker are understandably reluctant to talk about drugs. They're afraid of reprisals. But privately, some residents say the dealing goes on daytime and nighttime, out of view and in the open. They say there's never an end to it.
The first act of the court-appointed trustee for the Franklin Development Project was to hire Boston policemen to remove the drug dealers. Thanks not to the city, but to the trustee who used federal money, about $300,000 of it, the neighborhood has Boston policemen on every street and corner for 30 days. Some anti-drug crusaders say this is just what Roxbury needs. But another community leader, black Muslim minister Don Muhammad of Muhammad's Mosque, strongly disagrees. He says an army couldn't help.
This community needs leadership more than it needs police. The problem in this community is we have absentee landlords, so to speak. We have people who are not concerned because they don't own the apartments that they live in. Once you have a responsible people, ownership here, they won't even need the police. They would drive out the drug pusher and the drug user.
Echoing a common Roxbury theme, Minister Don demands action from the courts.
When a drug pusher is apprehended, he needs to be charged with the fullest extent of the law. We need to look upon a drug pusher as someone who is as vicious as someone driving an automobile 150 miles an hour in a 30-mile zone and children crossing the street.
For the 10 o'clock news, I'm David Boeri.
For the longest amount of time that is possible when
with something not only more modern, but at the same time more durable.
To what extent are tenants responsible for some of the problems in these buildings?
A considerable amount. You know, you can, if you looked at it prior to this, I mean, a road should never get that big, you know, but it's really a very hard problem, and I try not to address it. How you doing, Lauren? Hey, gentlemen. We're up here with the ladies.
Sure. Okay, good, thank you.
You want to get ready to be on camera, man? Take up space.
This is not an innocent spot.
Why is that?
Nothing's particularly great. Okay? They might be from a different part of the development.
Do that. Go ahead, start again.
Pardon?
I'm going to close it and open it.
This is the second day. I'm getting your down.
Do you mind if I come in?
Yeah.
They've taken out the sinks, they've taken out the stoves. If the refrigerator belongs to Franklin Park, that's going. Floors will all be done. They found what problems there were in the structural downstairs, and they're able to correct that. You know, washing machines have done a lot of damage. In the fact that these are not concrete floors like you'll find in a lot of hot buildings. If the washing machine doesn't stay into the sink and it jumps out, you've got a drop ceiling down underneath, violation of the contract. But if you don't regulate it, then you're gonna constantly be back doing that ceiling again. I went to an apartment yesterday where it's leaking right down into the office at Bob Franklin Park. And then we went upstairs to where the apartment was, and sure enough, the washing machine was running and it's all over the floor. Okay? The pipe in the back was leaking. She didn't know it, but at the same time, I could see that the water was running free.
Right.
Go ahead.
On the floor.
Oh, well, that's probably because they pulled out the refrigerator and the pan underneath got wet or something like that. I don't mind plastic, but I don't want the roaches.
I got you covered.
Yes.
Excuse me. I think I just knocked the building down.
Doesn't take much.
Do you get the roaches, some of the roaches over here?
Oh, yeah.
We'll get a lot more. And it says
Small ones.
The way the media uses Roxbury is to say unworthy. And it's only an occasional block here or there. But when the media
Alma Lewis lives on the same street where Tiffany Moore was gunned down last weekend. But Homestead is a long street, and Roxbury, says Lewis, is a better community than captured by television cameras. Drug warriors are the exception, not the rule in Roxbury. And though Tiffany was killed by criminals, Lewis also blames poor federal and local policies. Part of the problem, she says, is federal housing requirements that create crowded and hostile conditions.
Well, the whole point to Section 8 was to break up any concept of housing project and to disseminate people throughout all areas, not to concentrate them and make new projects. The result has been new projects.
Lewis also criticizes poor police performance.
Now, every child knows where drugs are. So it's remarkable to me that somebody has to keep telling the authorities where the drugs are.
But she is equally hard on her own community.
The other part of the equation is that people like me have to refuse to allow certain chaos on their blocks. And I will harass all city authorities as well as the people who are making the confusion until they are tired of me and stop doing it. A community has to set its own standards. The police can't do that. By the time you get to the place where criminals are shooting, that's too late. It starts with loud noises, fast automobiles, yelling. It starts with being out of control.
Still, Lewis is optimistic, not because of the politicians who put extra police out on patrol, but because of the people who live here.
I'm not going to live like that, and I'm not going to get up and run. That's the easy way out. I then have to run every 20 years. But you can live at Concord or Lexington and look at where the country began while I run vigorously every 10 or 15 years. That isn't suitable. That isn't suitable. I don't know how to inspire young people who are black if every time something becomes black, you have to get up and run away from it. No, it's your obligation to stay there and make it work.
For the 10 o'clock news, I'm Meg Valancourt.
The trial was supposed to begin Monday. Scott Arsenault and John Phoebe, both 24, both from Somerville, both facing 20 years in prison if convicted of manslaughter in connection with the beating death last summer of a 35-year-old Cambodian refugee named Bung Vong. The trial was supposed to begin Monday, but for the fourth time it was postponed and rescheduled for the 17th of this month. Elaine Song, who coordinates the group Asians for Justice, says the attack on Vong last August reflects a growing trend of anti-Asian violence.
There have been acts of vandalism, serious acts of vandalism in Dorchester over the last fall, and there's been a series of robberies in Chelsea. It goes often with the seasons, and as we enter the warmer weather, I think we have to, we have a lot to worry about.
In Revere, where Vong and his family first lived after arriving in the U.S., school officials are now focusing attention on the problem of whites lashing out at an ever-increasing number of Cambodian and Vietnamese refugees. And here at the Beachmont School, they are designing new programs to encourage racial harmony.
Now, before you get nervous, you haven't done anything wrong. We're just here in trying to educate you on the differences between the American culture, the way we live, and the Cambodian culture.
Last month at Beachmont, where 1 out of every 5 junior high students is of Asian origin, a special assembly of 7th and 8th graders heard history teacher Nunzio Benevento explain recent events in Southeast Asia, and then heard Asian and American students ask each other some pointed questions.
Do you Cambodian children want to be friends with American children?
Yes, I do.
What I tried to explain in my talk was that every person my age or even older than me is an immigrant who came here from a foreign country. And I said, that's all they're doing. They're just immigrants coming from a foreign country who want to live in a new country. And I said that every group of immigrants that came to the United States were punished. And I said, it's the same thing. It's just after a while, I says, 20 years from now, you won't even realize, what is going on. They'll be all assimilated together.
Maybe they don't know much about myself and my people. I think so. And now they know much more, and then they try to make friends.
I've learned most of what the ordeals that they've gone through in Cambodia trying to come to America, and coming here and people beating them up is just making it worse.
There's more freedom here than over there.
Is the freedom worth it, considering the trouble you've had?
Yes.
Next week, Revere youngsters, as well as members of the Chinatown community here in Boston, will celebrate the Cambodian New Year, complete with costumes and native dancing. Just another in a series of efforts geared toward bridging the understanding gap. Efforts that may eventually head off tragedies such as the death of Boon Vong. For the 10 o'clock news, I'm Marcus Jones.
For Ray Flynn, it all started at a South Boston housing project. That's where he announced his first quest for City Hall from D Street, now called West Broadway. Back then, 1983, there were no black families in this or any Southie project. 4 years later, and just an election night away from a second Flynn term, there are still no black families in South Boston projects. Times don't always change. In all, there are 69 BHA developments that house 1/10 of the city's population. Many of them are integrated and have been for years. South Boston is the exception. South Boston, hometown of Ray Flynn, home turf of William Bulger, the Senate president who himself grew up in public housing. The Mary Ellen McCormick, to be exact. McCormick, where the faces of its tenants today resemble the faces of its tenants half a century ago, the first housing project anywhere in New England. Back then, its complexion was simply a sign of the times. The city was white, and so were its projects. Slowly but surely that changed. Minorities moved to Boston and took their place in public housing. This is Jamaica Plains Bromley Heath in the 40s. This is the South End's Cathedral project in the 50s. Come the 60s, and public housing took on a different face altogether. Non-white occupancy doubled during that decade, from 13% at the start to 37% by its end. And so it went in the 70s. Through it all, South Boston stayed white, just like it is today, despite a BHA waiting list that is 4/5 minority and growing. As of this September, more than 1,400 white families were on that list, along with more than 9,600 non-white families. Last year at this time, the numbers looked like this. The non-white numbers have grown, the white total has shrank. If we look back a few years and break down the totals by race, we have an instant lesson in ethnic history. Let's start with 84, white, black, Hispanic, and Asian. 1985, 1986, 1987. Today, the white demand has edged up by less than 100 families, while the increase in all other races is staggering. That's the demographic reality behind all political rhetoric.
We have proven that the hopes that unite us are stronger than the fears that separate us.
Flynn is the man ultimately responsible for public housing in Boston, and the reason is receivership. In 1979, the courts took over the BHA to remedy what they considered gross mismanagement that resulted in deplorable conditions. Those, by and large, have disappeared, but racial isolation remains, despite the fact the court named Flynn the receiver back in 1984. And ever since, his intentions are still just that, intentions reiterated today.
And no one can tell anyone where to live, and neither can anybody tell a person where they can't live.
Who'd have thought it would take this long? Who'd have guessed it would come so soon? Just a week before an election, and tenants are being asked to welcome new neighbors right in Ray Flynn's backyard. For the 10 o'clock news, I'm Hope Kelly.